If you'll take your seats, please, we'll begin. We're so pleased with the perfect day we're having, but maybe it's too perfect. People don't want to come back in the building. We have 5 more speakers today, first day of our summit. And again, I'm going to give you brief bios of all 5. And hopefully we can be a little more efficient in transitioning from speakers. The first speaker is Caryn Hobbit. Caryn is President and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Institute for 21st Century Energy. Caryn's remarks will highlight energy and climate change realities facing American businesses and consumers. She will define the scale and scope of U.S. energy challenges and the opportunities for smart energy action that can be an engine for economic recovery, increase energy security, and promote U.S. competitiveness. Last month, Caryn participated in the International Energy Agency's Business Council meeting in Paris with 25 of the world's biggest energy producers and consumers. There she noted that, and I quote, "It was not the capital crunch that was their concern. It was the potential for a government crunch. Many of these industry leaders collectively warned about the growing government desire to manage the energy markets by stepping in to change the rules of the game again," unquote. Caryn holds a degree in international policy studies and political science from Rice University. Following Caryn will be biochemist Himadri Pakrasi, Director of the International Center for Advanced Renewable Energy and Sustainability at Washington University in St. Louis. He holds a doctorate degree from the University of Missouri Columbia and has built a strong reputation for his work on photosynthesis and bioenergy production. He's keenly interested in bridging the differences between the biological and physical sciences and leads large-scale multi-institutional systems biology projects. The center that he directs at WashU is conducting research on biofuels and other alternative energy applications, and the university plans to invest more than $55 million into this center. The next presenter will be Bob Dixon, Senior Vice President and Global Head of Efficiency and Sustainability at Siemens Building Technologies. He is also Industry Vice Chair for the Alliance to Save Energy and President of the National Association of Energy Service Companies. Since Siemens Building Technology founding in the mid-90s, it has implemented more than $1.5 billion in energy efficiency projects that help companies all over the world upgrade their buildings and building components to make them more comfortable, safe, secure, and energy efficient. Bob earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from California Polytechnic State University. After Bob will be Mike Cheshire, Chairman and CEO of Great Plains Energy and Kansas City Power and Light. Mike has a national role in energy technologies through his chairmanship of the Electric Power Research Institute's Board of Directors. He's also a member of the Executive Committee of the Edison Electric Institute and chair of the Energy Efficiency Task Force, which is looking for ways to make energy efficiency a viable alternative for utilities. Mike earned a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from Georgia Tech, an MBA in finance from Loyola College in Baltimore, and is a graduate of the Advanced Management Program at Harvard. Last but not least, we have Bob Cruz, the Executive Director of Global Vehicle Engineering for Hybrids, Electric Vehicles, and Batteries at General Motors. Another Missouri S&T grad, Bob earned his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering at Rolla in 1981. He also holds a master's in management from MIT's Sloan School. Bob and his team have played a key role in developing the Volt, an electric hybrid vehicle currently under development by GM. He also has led GM's global powertrain integration, where he was responsible for the first hybrid powertrain developed for full-size trucks. And with that quick overview of our 5 speakers, please join me in welcoming Caryn Hobbit, who will discuss the energy and climate change realities facing American businesses and consumers.
Well, thank you, and thank you for that kind introduction. You'll be delighted to know that I'm not doing a PowerPoint. My pink suit should be enough to keep you all awake. Let me first commend the University of Missouri System for holding what I hope will be the first a series of energy summits. It certainly is timely, and it's really important that we begin a much more national debate on these critical issues. You're going to hear in my remarks a little bit, I'll warn you in advance, a little bit of T. Boone, a little bit of Dale Klein, a little bit of Joan Woodard, and a little bit of Dan Cole. Those were not singers, those were the previous speakers. And the reason is that I think there's a growing consensus. If you're conspiratorial, you may think I snuck a peek at their remarks, but what it should provide you is a fail-safe primer on certainly what is going to be a test administered by the university after this. So here is your cheat sheet for the test later on. You know, as I flew here this morning from D.C., on my left was a passenger. She was a woman, middle-aged, and she was going to a clothing trade show, and she was surprised when I told her it was Earth Day. On my right was a middle-aged gentleman who was reading a quantum physics book. I knew it because that's what it said on the front. And he was doing a cost and schedule exercise on his laptop, and in front of him was a swimmer, a professional swimmer, who was meditating before his meet. And what struck me was how incredibly different all these people were, but how incredibly bonded together we were and are for common challenges as Americans. And of course, I was thinking about energy at the time. But the other thing that really struck me in looking at their backgrounds was clearly the huge differences in understanding of exactly what and how great these challenges are in confronting our energy situation. So I know that you all are here to explore and debate how we're going to chart a new energy course and take into account some of the things you hear from us. But I thought, when I was thinking about what I was going to speak to you about today, I thought it would be important to lay out exactly where are we today. You can't chart a new course successfully unless you know where you're starting from. And on this new course, we need a new compass. And some people have alluded to some of the points on that compass, and I'm going to lay out what I think are the new points also on this compass rose. As most speakers have pointed out today, energy security is among the biggest challenges our nation will face in this 21st century. And it's a very unique public policy issue because it touches on so many other issues. First, our economic security depends on energy. And why do I say that? Well, an affordable, reliable supply of energy for our nation is essential, if not integral, I would argue, to our economy to grow and to recover from the financial crisis in which we find ourselves. Our environmental security depends on energy. Our environmental security depends on energy. Why? Well, because the choices we make and how we transform, how we produce and consume and use energy over the next few years can put us on a path for increased environmental sustainability, but if it's mishandled, the consequences to our economy, our security, and the environment will be certainly most unwelcome. And of course, our national security depends heavily on energy. And Joan articulated a lot of those reasons. I'll just say one more, which is the competitiveness of our nation and the standing abroad of our nation is greatly affected by our availability and our ability to have an abundant and reliable supply of energy. You cannot operate from a point of weakness. We have to operate from a standing of strength. So I know you all would agree that our nation is facing a number of challenges at this moment, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that energy is among the most important and certainly is one of the most complex. At this time, we need new partnerships, new instruments, and new players to set the course for solving our nation's energy challenges. And this requires a new paradigm, a new model to bring the best of the business community, the best of academia, and the best of local, state, and federal governments together to harness our nation's deep well of innovation to allow us to lead America, and even in the world, to a more secure, clean, and prosperous energy future. Last summer, I saw on a very small scale how this model actually bears out in real time through an effort pioneered at the Colorado State University. I realize that's a rival university, but I think it's instructive. A team of student and professional researchers developed a snowmobile engine that was 300 times cleaner and more efficient than existing models. Remember, these were students in Colorado. Their more efficient engine wasn't just more efficient, but it also reduced tailpipe emissions by about 90%. So they took this invention and they collaborated with the University School of Business, and this team of innovators designed a business plan so that their invention could have broader commercial application to the engines of small, very high-polluting vehicles which were widely used in the developing world. And now, today, this technology is used in cities all over the Philippines, and now they have plans to franchise that all over Southeast Asia. But how did this happen? Well, they had seed money from research from local organizations. They had researchers and engineers from the university. They had laboratory space, which was actually underwritten and donated by the local government. They had a federal energy lab underwrite some of the more expensive research. And they had early private sector involvement. These innovators took that idea, they perfected it, and now they're selling it globally. But of course, at many points, this could have failed. This could have died, but it didn't, and that's because all of these elements worked together. You know, it's this type of partnership it shouldn't be an interesting story, it shouldn't be an anecdote, it shouldn't be a human interest story, it's got to become more commonplace. These unconventional ways of doing business are really what is going to underpin and underwrite the fundamental changes our energy future commands us to take. So, as you know, here in the university community, putting a technology on the shelf is one thing, but getting it to move off the shelf is quite another. And make no mistake about it, as everybody else has said today, innovation and technology will be the cornerstone of our new approach to energy. And these innovative new partnerships will certainly be part of the plan. And the reason we need these new partnerships, and we need them soon, is because our energy reality is getting far more stark. So what are these realities? First and foremost are the world's growing and changing energy demands. Global demand for energy will go up by 50% between now and 2030. 75% of that demand will be in the developing world. Electricity demand is going to go up 100% over that same time, 100%. And at the same time, 1.6 billion people don't have access to electricity. We want to close that energy poverty gap. We want to close that energy poverty gap. As one of the core values of Americans, we want to lift people out of poverty and despair. But if we do, and more people have access to jobs, there'll be more people that have a demand for transportation and energy, and our equation gets starker all the time. Second, we also must confront the reality of energy costs. Capital costs for energy projects are increasing. Costs are going up across the board for copper, for steel. We heard from Ameren the cost for a nuclear power plant, which used to be about $1.5 billion, is about $7 billion. Or I'm sorry, that was from Dale Klein. And access around the world for credit is growing increasingly difficult. We know, according to the International Energy Agency, that around the world we need about 26 trillion, you know, in Washington, billion, trillion these days, you know. It doesn't really quite matter, we're all zero crazy. $26 trillion over the next 25 years to meet energy demands. And we have to ask ourselves, is that money going to be invested? Is that capital going to be available? Can it be invested in the places and in the types of technologies we need? And I think that is one of our principal problems, is that we don't have the policy environments yet here and around the world that make those types of investments welcome and able to thrive. Third, we must confront the reality of our environmental challenges. Today, obviously, is Earth Day, and the media is very focused on the extra attention we can pay to taking steps to improve our environment. And clearly, we can make great strides in that regard, especially in the area of energy efficiency. But one thing that it's not often reported, in fact, I would say if ever reported, that smart energy action, smart energy policy, don't just improve energy security, they materially improve our environment. Smart energy policy improves the environment. There are many people that say there's energy debate over here and environmental debate over here. They're inextricably intertwined and they have mutual benefits. I think it's fair to say that everybody certainly here, and I think across the country, wants to be involved in a more national debate on energy and climate. It's not a discussion to be left to Washington, trust me. And I think every American must take advantage of an opportunity to get into the debate, because every American, every household, every business, large and small, has a huge stake in both the energy and climate debate. There's costs, there's benefits, and people need to understand as we wade into this, it's not going to be easy. That's why today at my institute back in Washington, we released what we call the Climate Change 101 paper to help familiarize people around the country about what we're talking about, what issues are on the table, and what's the actual vocabulary we're using. You'd be surprised to really find out how many people don't understand that there's 7 greenhouse gases. Please take a look at our paper, and there's a video. Our website is www.energyxxi.org. That's Energy 21. That website was taken, so it's energyxxi.org. I'll tell you a little bit later about some of the efforts we've undertaken. But on staying on climate for a minute, right now the Obama administration and the Congress have different climate change proposals on the table, as Dan said from Ameren. The Obama administration's goal right now is to cut U.S. emissions to 14% below 2005 levels by 2020 and by 83% by 2050. So to achieve this goal, our nation will need to cut or reduce 1 gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions by 2020. For those of you that left your supercomputers at home, 1 gigaton is 1 billion metric tons. So between now and 2020, we have to take 1 billion metric tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere to actually meet the midterm goal of the Obama administration's plan. How big is a gigaton of greenhouse gas emissions? If anybody knows the answer to this, you get an A, you don't have to take the final. I'll just give you 3 snippets to give you an idea to give some context to this. You would have to build 130 nuclear plants in place of coal-fired power plants. You would have to install 1.7 million acres of solar panels, or you'd have to install 127,500 large wind turbines in lieu of coal-fired power plants. So I think it's important that we understand the scope and the scale of the challenge. That's not saying we can't do it, but let's go into this with a realistic view so we can design realistic policies. It's going to take a major transformation of how we produce and consume energy. It's going to take time, it's not going to be easy, and yes, it is going to be costly. And for anyone who tells you it's not, they don't understand the facts. It means we have to be realistic, as I said. We have to be realistic about the state of technology, we have to be realistic about its commercial viability, and we have to be realistic about the timelines and mandates we impose upon ourselves and our economy. We cannot mandate what technology cannot deliver. Fourth, we must confront our global competitiveness. In 2008, the U.S. sent abroad anywhere between $400 and $700 billion to fund imports of foreign oil. Unless we take action to increase our domestic supplies at home, that number could go up. You heard that repeatedly from T-Boone. It's hard to remain competitive when we are sending our badly needed capital overseas. And some of those places certainly do not have our best interests at heart. You know, I spoke earlier of innovation and technology being a fundamental underpinning of our new energy strategy, and that requires new talent, new intellectual feedstock. I hope some of that is in this room. And a new national commitment to technical disciplines and education. We are lagging behind other countries in the number of qualified engineers we graduate. China already is graduating more engineers each year than we are, and the United States is graduating fewer science, mathematics, and engineering students than we did just 15 years ago. We have got to reverse this trend. Today, we're consumed with reducing our dependence on foreign oil. I hope tomorrow our biggest concern is not reducing our dependence on imported intellect. If I had a chance to answer the student that asked T. Boone Pickens, what would you have studied? I graduated from Rice University in political science and international policy. Like T. Boone, my degree has served me well, but if I was graduating today, I would be an engineering student with a master's in finance. Absolutely. You can't just be an engineer. You have to understand the applicability of technology into the marketplace. So we need both, and that's what I would answer if he's watching by the internet. There's your answer, hopefully. The other thing we have to realize is that we have to overhaul our regulatory system. Our federal and state government regulatory structures are so complicated and so onerous, they are inhibiting us relative to other nations. In the area of nuclear, China's building about 20 nuclear plants right now. It takes them about 5 years a pop. While we rightly so, as Dale Klein pointed out, are going to have a longer period for review as we're getting back into this. But we have to streamline our regulatory process to be competitive. It is absolutely incomprehensible that we can't get anything built in this country at this time. So we have to address the realities of demand, of cost, of the environment, and global competitiveness when we design our new energy policy framework. Yes, this is a sobering assessment, but I don't think it's discouraging. And as you all well know, Missouri's native son, Harry Truman, once said, quote, "A pessimist is one who makes difficulties of his opportunities, and an optimist is one who makes opportunities of his difficulties." I, for one, am an optimist in this debate, and I believe that the United States can make opportunities out of these difficulties, but it's going to require more than just identifying new sources of energy. It's going to require new approaches. Central to that new approach, as I alluded to earlier, is that new paradigm of cooperation between government and business and state and local and federal governments, and bringing the business community in earlier so that we've got things out into the marketplace earlier. But there are other components to this too. First, we need a new financial architecture for our new energy economy to flourish. Between the laboratory and the marketplace is that infamous valley of death, where the inability for new technologies to attract funding or generate revenue can mean the difference between success and failure. We must bridge that gap. The successful development of technologies requires capital. To reduce, an estimate to reduce U.S. gas consumption 20% in the next 10 years, we might need $1.5 billion invested in clean energy technology. So if we want to accelerate that technology, we have to accelerate the formation of that capital. There are not a lot of people out there right now flush with capital waiting to put their capital into high-risk ventures, given where we are today. So our institute has proposed the establishment of a clean energy bank of the United States, and currently right now in the Senate and the House, this proposal, I'm pleased to say, is under debate. This new financial institution would provide concessionary financing and other products to accelerate the development and invest in clean energy technologies and projects, and it would be funded through its own operations rather than on the back of the taxpayer. And that should be very good news from all of us taxpayers who have an increasingly big tax burden to bear. Secondly, we need to develop those energy policies that really put us on the right long-term path. This is not a short-term proposition, it's a long-term proposition that requires long-term vision. Over the past year, our institute, which was established at the end of 2007, put together a comprehensive pro-growth energy strategy that includes nearly 90 detailed recommendations and timelines for implementation by the administration and the Congress. We presented to President Obama 14 days after his election, as we told him we would. We worked with his transition team to help them understand this transition plan. You can see it on our website, energyxxi.org, and sign on to our principles. You're going to have T. Boone asking for your vote, and I'm asking for your vote. But at the end of the day, I don't have $58 million to get your vote, as T. Boone does. But irregardless, everybody needs to understand the issues and become much more conversant on the various policy choices that are out there. And I think we have enjoyed support at the highest levels of government. We have talked with T. Boone. T. Boone has talked with us. We share many things in common. And we have seen a broad response from every state across our country, and we're delighted about that. But we need comprehensive energy policies, not policies that just benefit a few select industries or ignore others completely. The bottom line is we're going to need a whole lot of energy from a wide variety of sources, and we're going to need it now and into the future. Yes, we are going to need renewable energy. It has a rightful place at the table. Renewable energy currently accounts for less than 3% of our electricity mix. And even with a tripling of solar and wind over the next 10 years, as this administration has greatly proposed, it will still comprise less than 10% of our electricity demand. We also need a very predictable fiscal environment for these technologies to thrive, rather than turning production tax credits on and off like a light switch. But remember, wind and solar are still intermittent sources of energy, so we're going to need baseload power. And baseload power means nuclear power. I know it's a subject currently under debate with the Callaway plant expansion and extension underway, but it's important to remember that we as a country get 20% of our electricity from nuclear power. It's cost effective, it's emissions free, and if we are going to meet our twin goals of environmental security and energy security, nuclear energy is an absolute must. However, we do have to solve and commit to a permanent solution to our nation's nuclear waste. And stay tuned, we're releasing a paper on that in the next 2 weeks. Here in Missouri, coal from Wyoming powers millions of homes and businesses. It's in your interest and in the nation's interest for you to continue to use that. It provides our country 50% of our electricity. And we have enough coal to last over 250 years. But we have to minimize the CO2 impact of that production. We've called for an increase in research and development funding for clean coal technology and carbon capture and sequestration, and we're delighted to see through the stimulus and other budget proposals that increase will come to fruition. Now let's talk about oil and natural gas. The fact is, oil and natural gas will be with us for some time, for the foreseeable future, frankly. You can't forget that 96% of our transportation sector still relies on oil, and we can't just wave a magic wand and have that change overnight. We have to have Congress and the administration allow us to explore and produce domestically on our shores in the outer continental shelf. We have put those resources out of reach for over 30 years. That has been a huge problem, and we have shot ourselves in the foot. From just the outer continental shelf alone, we have enough fuel for 80 million cars for 35 years, and we could heat 60 million homes for 100 years. Shouldn't we be spending that capital here at home to create jobs and industries here at home for American resources while we get another set of technologies into the future? Absolutely yes. And we've got the capability, the technology to do it in an environmentally responsible way. Remember, after Katrina and Rita, which ripped through the Gulf of Mexico, the U.S. Coast Guard confirmed there was not an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. We can do this responsibly, and we should, and it's past time. Yes, we have to do more in energy efficiency. We've made great strides. We use 50% less energy to produce a dollar of GDP than we did 30 years ago. But the next best source of energy is the one we currently waste, and we have to harness that energy through technology so that we have more available energy at an affordable rate. The federal government has a role to play in that, but so do the states, since they are responsible for establishing building codes, and we hope that they will include energy efficiency in those building codes. And we need to reward electric utilities and consumers for more efficient energy practices. The last component of our approach is reducing overly burdensome regulation to actually get energy projects constructed and not canceled. If you remember nothing else, don't remember that I'm in a pink suit, you passed the test. You all are familiar with the term NIMBY, not in my backyard. Remember banana, and it's not the banana as it relates to potassium, it's banana as it build absolutely nothing anywhere near anyone or anything. And that is a syndrome, it is a plague on our economy and our country. We can't build anything anywhere. One power company spent 13 years getting federal and state permits for a 90-mile interstate transmission line that took less than 3 years to build. Currently, there are 300 energy projects across the United States that are in litigation. And it's not just, power projects, it's also renewable energy projects. And just because a project is green doesn't mean it gets easier and easier time. We used to call it red tape, and now we have green tape. We've got projects from off the coast of Massachusetts to off the coast of California that can't get cited. So we've got to restore some sanity to our regulatory process to get some projects built to sustain a 21st century economy. Our energy infrastructure was built after World War II, and we haven't done anything about it yet. The federal government has to play a greater role in getting some transmission lines sited, and we need to reform our laws so that some of the environmental laws that are well-intentioned are not manipulated and used to bring needless and endless delays to energy projects. Right now, more energy policy is being set in the courtroom than in the Congress. And that's ultimately leaving our energy policy to be adjudicated in the courtroom rather than the halls of Congress, and that's doing a grave disservice to our nation's competitiveness. Historian Arnold Toynbee observed that civilizations, quote, come to birth and proceed to grow by successfully responding to successive challenges. They break down and go to pieces if and when a challenge confronts them, which they will not meet. Throughout history, societies have been defined by their ability to confront and meet challenges of their day. For our society, for our generation, for our students, for our families, for our businesses, energy is that challenge. The actions we take, or the ones we fail to take, over the next few years will determine the path for our country for decades to come. Are we prepared to chart the right course? Do we have the right compass? Will our children and grandchildren grow up with the diverse sources of energy needed to power their homes, their workplaces, their transportation modes? Will they have a clean environment devoid of smog and pollution? Will they actually have well-paying jobs and have a good quality of life? Will they have a country where they feel safe, that is protected, that takes into account their individual and national security? That's what's at stake over our debate in energy, and why it's imperative we take this as a command of the highest order. Thank you for inviting me here today. I look forward to seeing you in the course of the next day. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Dr. Himadri Pakrasi of Washington University in St. Louis.
Good afternoon. I want to start by first saying how wonderful it has been for me during the day to sit here and listen to all the other speakers before me. I congratulate the University of Missouri system for organizing such a timely conference on a topic that's of national and international interest. I would also like to mention that, several people, that it has already been mentioned that they, in the past, has one time or other, has been at University of Missouri Columbia, at least has visited Columbia. Well, I visited Columbia for about 3 years or so during the last millennium as a graduate student and took my Ph.D. degree from Tucker Hall, biology. So it's always a pleasure to come back to my alma mater and see all the wonderful things that are happening, and looks like a lot is happening. My goal today is to give you a simple picture of what a Midwestern university, such as Washington University, is doing in this area of energy, environment, and sustainability, and in particular, something that I'm sure that all of us by now has realized, I guess two things. One is that the issues related to energy, whether it's in the United States or in Missouri or on our planet, it's huge. I don't think that I need to belabor any more about those big numbers like 14 or 35 terawatts. We know it's big. And it will take a lot to solve this problem. It will take a lot from the point of view of deploying different kinds of technologies. There is no question, probably by now in our minds, after hearing everybody, that that's an obvious. Also, what we heard over and over again is that to solve this problem, we need to be in the mode of collaboration. It's that aspect of it that I would like to emphasize as I go through my slides. And this is going to be an example that's based on what we have done at Washington University, but perhaps is applicable to many other institutions and entities. Washington University, about 2 years ago, established this center called the International Center for Advanced Renewable Energy and Sustainability, and acronym is ICARES. And we started with this statement by our Chancellor, Mark Wrighton, who himself is a qualified energy scientist of some repute. And what he said here, I will leave that for you to read, but the key aspects here is that, first of all, the goal of this center is to assess and form coalitions in the areas of energy and environment and sustainability within our institution. But then we said we want to go and collaborate with others. And in particular, for those of us who are in educational institutions, this last sentence, where we say that our university, and this probably applies to all universities, will prepare tomorrow's leaders and innovators engaged in securing abundant, affordable energy while preserving the environment and advancing economics and social development for the nation and our world. This probably summarizes many of the things that we discussed today and we'll be discussing during the rest of this conference. This is kind of an organizational chart, but this is just to tell you that iCares is an umbrella organization in our institution where there are various different kinds of activities that are taking place. For example, in the area of advanced renewable energy, we have some activities that are going on in this area that we call Missouri Bioenergy Research Consortium, and I will talk about this particular effort later on. There is also another effort that is centered on Photosynthetic Antenna Research Center. This is another effort that I will probably briefly have time to briefly talk about. And then a new initiative that has been started, and Dan Cole from Ameren has already alluded to this, a consortium for clean coal utilization. So again, iCares was created in 2007 to encourage and coordinate university-wide and external collaborative research. An important thing here is that this key initial goal is to foster institutional, regional, and international research. The I of iCare stands for international. And this is the aspect that I would like to address first. At the level of international activity, our university also have another entity called the Mcdonald International Scholars Academy. And in this academy, we have a very significant and deep relationship with 25 other institutions all over the world. And I will talk about this also. In the context of energy and environment, there is an initiative called the Mcdonald Academy Global Energy and Environment Partnership, or MAGEP. And this has taken is playing an important role in the activities at iCares. iCares' External Advisory Committee, we drew on our regional as well as national strengths in industry mainly and other organizations. As you can see here, we have representation from various industrial organizations at the highest level. But what I want to emphasize is that these are not just names to show. These are individuals who truly advise us. And we go back to them and ask them, what is the need from the industry as far as the academic research and development is concerned? And they have been very, very helpful in steering our path. As far as new resources, Washington University back in 2007 made some commitments, and even in this day and age of economic hardship, this has been being continued. So we have a new building that's coming up. We have about $500,000 of support per year that we then distribute to generate new kinds of pilot projects, each one of which have to be collaborative nature within the institution. There are funds that are available to attract endowed professors. And then, as I mentioned already, there is also universities' funds that are being used to support development of international projects with our academy partners, those 25 universities. So let's first talk about that international effort, because I think that this is kind of unique to my knowledge still in this country. This global partnership is with these 25 institutions. 17 of them are from Asia. We strategically decided at the time that this academy was formed that we will go where there is going to be a lot of activities that will be taking place during the next era. So you will see that there are 4 institutions from China, 3 from India. There are institutions from other parts of Asia, but we are also collaborating with institutions in Europe and also in Central and South America. What do we do with these academy partners? We interact at various different levels on different kinds of activities. We recruit very small number but very talented students, again, each one of them with special qualities that touch on collaborative efforts, interdisciplinary approaches, as well as leadership qualities. So these are really a special breed of about a dozen or to 20 students every year that we recruit from these institutions. But beyond that, we have set up meaningful research endeavors, research projects through the initial funding that was provided through Washington University's own funds to start projects between not just Washington University and one of these 25 institutions, but rather among the network of universities. This is actually leading to some very interesting new dimensions in our overall education and research activities. And one of the areas where we are putting a lot of emphasis on is energy, environment, and sustainability. Back in 2007, we invited all of our partner institutions to come to Washington University for an international meeting on energy, environment, and sustainability. There were many of the CEOs of these different universities. They actually showed up in Missouri, in St. Louis, 12 of them. And there was a declaration at the end of that international meeting where they all collectively said that this path of working together is a good one, and we will put more and more emphasis on it. This was then followed by, 18 months later, back in December of 2008, with the second international meeting that we held in Hong Kong. We have 2 partner institutions in Hong Kong. And among others who were there were these 4 individuals, and let me tell you who they are. John Mcdonald from Missouri. It's in his name that the International Academy is named. Our Chancellor, Mark Wrighton. Steve Lear, who is the CEO of Arch Coal, and I will talk briefly about what we are doing with them. And then present on December 9th was one of our invited speakers from Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, Stephen Chu, who literally 12 hours after his presentation on that day was nominated to be our next energy secretary. What he talked about on that day in Hong Kong is the energy and climate related research, the US perspective. And what we heard from him are these bold new visions, the implementations of which we are now observing in the last few months, and I hope in the coming years. These kinds of international interactions, I think, are forming the basis for certain things, certain kinds of research and development projects that would not have been possible if we would not have interacted with these international partners. So I think it's an important way of looking at this whole issue. After all, we have all heard about and we all admit that the issues around energy and environment are of global nature. We also have a field station called the Tyson Research Center that's in no way comparable to the research that this kind of field stations that this campus, Washington University of Missouri system has. But in any way, this Tyson Research Center, we consider this as a laboratory for environmental and energy related research, and there's a lot of activity that's going on there. And we are, for example, we are creating an outdoor lab for important research and teaching opportunities. We are in the process of building a green building that exceeds the platinum LEED specifications. But most important is that our students can participate in research and educational activities at this center. This is under iCares also. The other thing that we realized is that we need to bring in to Washington University and to St. Louis and Missouri noted leaders in the area of energy, environment, and sustainability. Here is one of our distinguished speakers, Nate Lewis from Caltech, who came to us back in last September. And the title of his talk was, "Where in the World Will Our Energy Come From?" Typically, we invite speakers to talk about global issues, but we emphasize that when they talk about all of these issues, one of the goals is that they should present data, because it's on the basis of data that all of us at an educational institution can then evaluate anything that is being said. There is, I mean, all of us know that there are lots of different kinds of claims and assertions that are being made in the area of renewable energy today. And as members of educational institutions, we owe it to others, to the society, to actually provide the real data that are present so that the evaluations are based, policies are made on the basis of those kinds of data. So that's the kind of presentation that Nate made and others are making. We also are organizing different kinds of workshops. Here is one that took place that was funded by the Federal Reserve in St. Louis. That was on economics of ethanol. This was timely because at that time, you may remember, this was last November, there were lots of issues around how ethanol is competing with food. And all that we did, again, as an education institution, is to provide a forum where debates took place between different participants. And there is a white paper that has been written on the basis of this, and those of you who are interested in that, please contact me and I'll be happy to provide you with the web link for that. Let me now talk a little bit about some of the renewable energy related research activities that are taking place, again emphasizing this aspect of collaboration. This one that I will talk about in the area of bioenergy touches on regional collaboration within Missouri. Okay, when we talk about bioenergy, it's nothing but this business of global photosynthesis. Of course, I'm biased because for the last 3 decades I have worked on photosynthesis, but if you really think about it, this is what the greenest of the green reactions that take place in our planet. Carbon dioxide is taken up, so it's a negative carbon reaction, and something good like oxygen comes out, but much more important, there are chemicals that are produced on which the rest of us, humans and other non-photosynthetic organisms, depend on. So this is a set of reactions that lead to lots of different kinds of research activities that all of us are familiar with. And what we did back in 2007, right around the time iCares was formed, we formed this consortium, Missouri Bioenergy Research Consortium. And we competed for funding from the Missouri Life Sciences Research Board, the Life Sciences Trust Fund funds. And we received funding for 2 years, and so this is the second year of that. Who are we? Well, we are these 20 investigators from 5 different organizations. Even though iCares took the lead, and I am the principal investigator and the director of this, we reached out to investigators at the Donald Danforth Plant Science Center, investigators at St. Louis University, at University of Missouri St. Louis, and University of Missouri Columbia. And you will notice that the co-director of this program is Gary Stacy, who has since that time has become a very good friend, because across the state, here is a place where we found a common ground. And I think that's something to keep in mind. It is true that many times we compete against each other. We compete because that's the way the whole infrastructure is set up. However, there are times when this kind of strategic, collaborative investments need to be made, because that's the way 2 + 2 becomes more than 4. And that's what we did here. And I must say that I'm very pleased with the level of engagement that each one of these 20 investigators have shown. We hold meetings, we have annual or biannual meetings, there are reports that are being written up, and all I see is that the collaboration has led to science and research that's a whole lot more than what I believe each one of us could do all by ourselves. What are the areas that we are working on? Well, there are 2 areas. One has to do, this is a long sentence and you can read it, but I will simplify it for you, has to do with lignocellulose and has to do with microbial carbon sequestration. I'll simplify it even more. National Geographic back in October 2007 had these 2 pictures. One is green dreams. That shows that there are tall plants with lots of cellulosic material. Those are probably miscanthus, but tall plants with lots of cellulosic materials, new energy crops that are growing, and here is a warrior who is standing in front of that. And the concept is that somehow or other we have to figure out how to use that material from plants and convert that to usable chemicals, including biofuels. The other one that I will talk about a little bit more now has to do with algae. And it's again from that same issue of National Geographic. And what it shows is the following, and I'll read these sentences to you because this is something that's important, I think. So what it says is the following. High hopes hang on bags of algae outside the Red Hawk power plant near Phoenix. Researchers say the fast-growing green scum, algae, fed by power plant exhaust, could soak up carbon dioxide while cranking out 5,000 gallons of biodiesel an acre each year. This is what everybody talks about. The 4 words that are of importance to me are the last 4. It says at least in theory. And what we are trying to do through our research and development is to convert that theory into practice. That's our goal. This is doable. What do we need to do so that, first of all, we achieve the potential and then deploy it in the real world? Now, there is another aspect of it that I thought I'll bring it up, is that this kind of algal fuel is now being touted to be an excellent source of fuel for commercial aircrafts. Dave Daggett from Boeing and his colleagues back in 2007 wrote a white paper, and where they're talking about this business of developing soybean crops as feedstock for lipid. And you can read through this, but let me just summarize this. During their research work, what they discovered is that, yes, soybean is great, but how much you can produce from all the soybean that you can grow, not that much. So they are saying one promising feedstock is algae, and they are saying this same kind of number, anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000 gallons per acre per year that you can produce from algae. This is 150 to 300 times more oil than a crop of soybeans. And then they say that if you have this potential achieved, then land mass equivalent to the size of the U.S. state of Maryland, I don't know what's against Maryland, but anyway, if you have that much, that kind of size land mass, and you grow algae there, that's going to solve the problem. That will produce enough jet fuel to fly all the aircrafts that are being flown right now. And here are some numbers. And basically what it says is, just again to summarize, is that corn, soybean, canola, and oil palm produces a certain amount of oil per hectare per year. And you can see that these numbers are much bigger when you consider algae. This is the basis for those assertions that are being made. However, those are projections. Those are theory at the best. And we need to do a lot of research and a lot of development to actually achieve those goals. If we can, that will be tremendous. So one of the things that you have to do is grow them, grow a lot of them. How do you grow a lot of algae? You can use open ponds like shown here. You can grow them in bioreactors, and they are very expensive. So the challenges are, how can we bring the cost for these closer to what the costs of these are? Again, a lot of research activity that needs to take place. This is the area where chemical engineers are specializing, controlled cultivation. Lab-scale photobioreactors are being built. Here is one that I participated in a collaboration with some Czech scientists, a photobioreactor system for precision cultivation of photoautotrophic microorganisms, aka algae, and for high content analysis of suspension dynamics. It's a typical chemical engineering kind of approach. You create photobioreactors and you precisely control the inputs and outputs and ask the question about productivity. Keep in mind though, this is lab scale. There is still a huge difference between going from this lab scale deployment to deployment in the real world. And this is where I think Missouri has a wonderful opportunity now to establish large-scale pilot plant projects, growing algae, and Gary Stacy and I, we have actually collaborated in putting together a proposal that was sent to one of the Missouri organizations, and we are waiting to hear the outcome of that review process. In that, we put in specifically a request for funds to actually take the research from this level to a really large-scale pilot plant project. The last one I will talk about very briefly is this new initiative that has started at Washington University under iCares called the Consortium for Clean Coal Utilization. I want to emphasize, we are not saying coal is clean. A lot of people, especially students here in the audience, may object to that. We are not saying whether coal is clean or not. We are not getting into that debate. What we are saying is this part, is the clean utilization of coal. Again, the concept of consortium, bringing together many entities. It started with core funding that came from Ameren UV, Arch Coal, Peabody Energy, Arch Coal being the second largest coal company in the country and headquartered in St. Louis. You have already heard about Ameren UV. Peabody Energy is arguably the largest coal company in the world. Together, they contributed $12 million for the next 5 years. And here we are also trying to now bring into this consortium others who have an interest in this area. And so the strategy here is to establish our university as a center for clean coal research, fund research consistent with the mission, hold annual meetings for the consortium members, hold workshops and short courses, and publicize to promote public awareness. Again, we are actively inviting anybody and everybody who is interested in joining the consortium to come talk to us. And where do we want to go? Eventually, we want to be in this kind of a state, and I will conclude with this. Here is the dream, right? This is what we are talking about. Here is a coal-fired power plant, carbon dioxide that's coming out, and you want to either sequester it by geosequestration. This is very, very important because the amount of CO2 that we are producing now, in order to cut that down by a significant amount, just algae is not going to do. I want to emphasize that many of us, oftentimes when we talk about this, we go into this hyperbole and we say biological carbon sequestration. I am also guilty of that. But in the overall picture, we need to do everything. We need to sequester geologically, and then we want to sequester by using photosynthetic organisms, algae and plants. And what you are seeing here is a conceptual drawing of a research power plant that we are very vigorously pursuing this, and hopefully within a short period of time, this will be a reality on the campus of Washington University. Let me conclude then by saying that there are tremendous potentials in our state, tremendous potential for collaborations. We have already heard from the 4 vice chancellors for research how much is going on at the 4 Missouri institutions. I have given you a short glimpse of what's going on at Washington University, and there are many other research institutions and educational institutions at Missouri. And I truly believe that the time has come for all of us to work together, not just put our names on a piece of paper, but do something that we have done here, which is make strategic alliance for meaningful collaborations that will lead to science and development at a level that's much higher than what any one of us can achieve. I thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us now in welcoming Bob Dixon of Siemens Building Technologies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm one of these guys that have a hard time standing behind a podium, so I'm going to get out in front. Chancellor Carney, President First Aid, Dr. Sobel, thank you so much. This is terrific. To those of you in the audience, I get to preach to the choir, the best part of my job, and those of you out in virtual land, hello to you too. I've entitled my talk today, Path Forward When the Perfect Storm Meets the Economic Tsunami. In the perfect storm, we're going to talk about global warming. But first, I'm going to ask a couple of little questions. Everybody's going to give you facts. I'm going to give you some facts. But I always like to ask this question. So how many out there, virtual land, you can sort of raise your hand if you'd like to, believe the cost of energy, electricity and gas, is going to go way down in the future? Yeah, I keep batting 1,000%. That's pretty good. How about environmental regulations? They're going to get a lot easier in the future too, right? Now this one I don't want to show hands because there may be somebody in this crowd that sitting in this audience wouldn't want to answer this, but global warming is a myth. That's interesting. First time I've ever had anybody raise their hand. I'm not an environmental scientist, but you know what? I'm not willing to take the risk. And I hope other people aren't too. And lastly, and you can't do this by a show of hands, I'm going to ask, what are you doing as a person to have a positive effect on the environment? So let's walk down this path together. These slides will go very quick. I don't have a pink suit, and so I can't catch your attention that way. And I realize, I guess I'm at the point of my life where I get to be the old guy with the briefcase out of town, but I figured out the difference between myself and T. Boone Pickens. It's 23 years and billions of dollars. There is clearly, going forward, a couple of mega trends: demographic change, urbanization, and what those two things are about. You know, the population is exploding, and we're all moving to the urban centers, and that is having a profound effect with in some ways, some scary consequences. Increasing scarcity of natural resources. Yeah, there's a growing need for environmental care. You see some regional shift in economic gravity. I'm one of these guys. Haven't figured out how to fly around the world without burning carbon fuel, but I get a chance to go to an awful lot of countries around the world talking about efficiency and sustainability, and my business practice is now in 28 nations. And when you get to countries like India and China and other places, you understand where the U.S. is doing much better in a lot of ways than we get publicity for. The challenges of those growing economies in their big cities are going to have profound effects. Just for reference, middle-level university, Jinan, China, technical university has 200,000 students. Think about trying to manage 200,000 20-year-olds. Not an easy challenge at all. The earth scientists will describe to you what the problems are. You know, you get energy coming in, greenhouse gases block it from coming out, the earth starts to warm. What are the implications? Well, guess what? We know the polar ice cap is in fact shrinking. I like graphics. I'm a visual person. I'm an engineer. Things that are pretty simple I can understand. And I'm also very much of a pragmatist. And what you can see is, in fact, the Arctic sea ice 1990 to 1999 and now is shrinking. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not an environmental scientist. I can't perfectly tell you what's going on, but that's real. And we can't take a chance not doing something. The cost of inaction is too much. The effects are profound. When you sit in the research our company has done and the organization that I get to be vice chair of, the Alliance of Save Energy, when we look at it, the costs to mankind are huge. You're talking droughts, you're talking environmental floods, you're talking things that just will change the way that, in fact, we live. And the cost of doing something, the longer we wait, the more, in fact, expensive and more difficult it will be to do some things. We know that global warming and climate change has profound effect on business. We know it's going to be expensive, in fact, to fix it, but it is manageable. And today we've heard an awful lot about, I think, farther-reaching things, technologies yet to be invented. Nuclear power plants, if I did the math right, 84 months to come online. That feels like a long, long time. And being sort of a pragmatist engineer, I'm going to talk about some things I think we can do starting when we leave this meeting tonight. When I go around the world, one thing is pretty clear. It is a global problem. There's clearly no global framework. You can go to countries that have signed up for Kyoto and that didn't work. You can go to countries that didn't sign up for Kyoto and realize, they're about the same state. Nothing has come together, and yet it is certainly a global economy and it's a global environment. And we have to figure out ways over time to bridge those two together. When you look at all of the things that have been created by the mega trends, and you look at the action that is starting to occur around the world and in our own nation, government leadership, certainly our leadership here in America during the last election has changed their position on the climate. You see an awful lot of increased actions by individuals. You see events like this here on Earth Day starting. That is why I call it a perfect storm. Why? Because there's so many things coming together, and all you have to do is pick up any magazine, any newspaper, any day of the week, and what do you find? People are talking about green. I hope it's not becoming an overused adjective, quite frankly, because there's more to talking about green than just talking about it. We do have to do something. The economic tsunami. Things in my business are going along pretty well. I do an awful lot of energy efficiency projects around the world. Our company alone, I think we're actually up to $2.5 billion now, 28 nations. This economic tsunami has hurt. It's fortunate I like my job because I know when my 401k went to the 201k, it's going to give me an opportunity to work for a couple, 2 or 3 more years. So I guess not everything's bad because I in fact like doing this. But we know it is real. Now, this is a little bit of a complex problem. And somebody mentioned earlier a silver bullet. If there was a silver bullet, I guarantee you, we already would have shot it. There isn't a silver bullet. It took a long time to get here, and it's going to take a long time, in fact, to fix it. So I'm going to talk to you about buildings, and I'm going to do that for a reason. But you know that some 40% of the world's energy is consumed in buildings and homes, responsible for 21% of the greenhouse gases. Interesting. That means those buildings and those homes are here today, and there becomes a great target for opportunity. The McKinsey Corporation did a big study on greenhouse gases, and what they determined that 4 out of the 5 things that could be done in buildings could have the biggest impact and the most cost-effective impact in the short term of helping with this problem. Building technology-related investments are 4 out of the 5 top investment opportunities, and those are existing buildings. In London, we helped co-sponsor a study that said that if London would just implement here today with existing technologies, they could reduce their carbon footprint by a significant amount. And those technologies will pay for themselves in 70% of the applications. That's not anything we have to invent. That's anything that isn't here today. That's existing technologies in existing buildings. What a wonderful opportunity. I like this little cartoon. Professor on the left says, climate change and global warming threatens our existence. And a lot of people would choose to sleep in the lower left-hand corner. In the middle, he erases the word existence, and he puts economy, and everybody says, oh my goodness, look at this. It's time for action. Well, the truth of the matter is, we know there is really no environmental awareness without some economic reality. And being, once again, a pragmatist, we've got to figure out how to do both those things putting together. So, what are the 6 things that I would prescribe? 1, a holistic approach to energy management sustainability, leverage existing technologies, and yes, invent some new technologies, utilize some innovative business models, increase our energy efficiency expertise. So I'm glad to talk to universities. There aren't enough energy engineers in the world. Progressive policies and enabling legislation, personal commitment. How many homes are there in America? Single-family homes? About 85 million. And the Census Bureau says that, in fact, when you look at family units, it's about 125 million units. And there are about 5 million buildings. I think it's 4.6 in normal buildings, about 500,000 in industry. There are about 125,000 schools and about 4,500, 4,400 universities and colleges. So why do I talk about, let's focus on some existing buildings? Because we can do that tomorrow. That's a short-term win and opportunity we can get to tomorrow. It is not anything we have to think, what are we going to do in 10 years? Do all the new buildings need to be designed up to great standards? Absolutely. I think that's going to happen anyway. But the existing building stocks, just in America, think of how many places there are that we could go, in fact, consume less energy. And when you consume less energy, you get to make less energy. And when you make less energy, guess what? Less greenhouse gases. And so it works together. So let's talk about these individually. It's interesting, and I don't expect anybody to read the slides, but we have laws that make you have your car checked for emissions. Almost everywhere in America, every year, every couple of years, is your car running efficiently? If not, we're not going to renew your license plates or your license, take your car off the road. In the world of buildings like this, the fire alarm systems get checked every year, every couple of years. Boilers get checked every year, stuff. I pick up a can of beans. My doctor says, read the can of beans, find out what you're putting into your system. But those 125 million homes and those 5 million businesses, do you think there are any laws that say, how's your building running? Is it efficient? Is it running like it used to be when we designed it? It's not there. Isn't that profound? The car that only lasts 10 years, that pollutes the atmosphere, we're very focused on, but hundreds of millions of other opportunities, there are no standards in place. I think that's actually something sort of profound, and maybe we should figure out how to put some requirements in place to inspect that. And that doesn't have to come from the federal government. That could be done on this campus, in this city, in the city down the street. One of the challenges we all face, I think, in business is low cost or best value. These buildings, this campus has been here, 100 and some odd years, I think, right? Buildings last a long time. So is it best to build a new building with the lowest cost without regard for the life cycle of the business, of the building? It makes no sense to do that. But it happens every single day in America and around the world. And they do something when we build buildings. We call it value engineering. Ever hear of that term? That means you take all the good stuff out and you're left with the stuff that isn't so good. That's value engineering. I can say, make it worse engineering, but I have a hard time understanding why there is value when you make it less efficient and the costs to run it are going to be much higher. When we look at energy, I think we have to look very holistically. And it starts from when you create the electron to down there at the end of the light bulb, the light bulb at the end of the chain. And when you start looking at all those things working together, then you will start to figure out some ways to get our arms around this problem and make it better. There are so many opportunities to improve the performance of a building or the performance of your home. The International Energy Agency says that for about $1 worth of energy efficiency, it's about the equivalency of $2 of creation of energy. That looks like a pretty good return on investment. I took engineering economy about 33 years ago. I didn't even need that class to figure this is a good investment. The smart grid. Interesting what's going to happen in the future, my belief. Someday, the people that create the energy all the way down to the consumer, that information flow is going to be so integrated that they'll be able to vary how much load comes on space based upon the actual interaction right down to an appliance. There are examples right now today in some of the service territories of the utilities where the utility, when it starts to get to be brown out, black out, when their load starts getting a little scary, they can literally go in and turn off your air conditioning system for 10 minutes. You would never notice it, but guess what? That reduces the load. It's an interesting way to see it starting to interact, and someday it's going to get down to the point where the appliances in your house are going to talk to that big, big system. There's no reason the state could not be one of the leaders in the development of those technologies and putting it in place. There have been a lot of examples around the world where the government, industry, investors, universities have gotten together to make a difference. During the last oil crisis, Denmark imported 99% of their energy use, energy consumption of the fuel. 99%. What do you think would happen when the energy crisis back then occurred? What happened to their economy? They were in dire straits. They got together as a nation. They got behind windmills, happened to have a lot of wind up there, so they could do it. They're the largest producer of windmills in the world, and now they're the only country in the European Union that is a net exporter of energy. From 99% import to a net exporter. They got together and did it. Germany, the leader in solar technology. Korea got together with their industry and government, became the leader in flat screen TVs where they used to have a secondary position. Guess what came out of the space mission, going to the moon? Solar panels, fuel cells. One time we invented that, and now we don't implement it like everybody else. Interesting. There's some really interesting business models out there. This is one that comes out of my business. I am actually the past president of the National Association of Energy Service Companies. It's a group of companies, many here in the U.S. and around the world, that go in and do energy efficiency projects, and that gets paid for out of the energy savings. Pretty neat business model, right? A university, a business, hospital, a school does not have to use their capital funds in order to fund that infrastructure project. The industry's done billions of dollars in that model. What a great way in today's world, when there is not enough money to be spent on everything, to utilize that sort of a business model. In fact, to do the needed energy infrastructure upgrades, because we know that energy consumption reduction has a very positive effect on greenhouse gases. And why? This business model is focused on efficiency. It's faster to do. It's faster because it's a design-build process. It's faster to implement, which means jobs can be created more quickly. It leverages the capital funds, and guess what? Everything is measured, and the compensation is directly linked to performance. What a wonderful thing. Many projects we do, you never have any true measure and verification. Is a project, in fact, performing the way it should be? There's a business model out there, been around for 20 years, in fact, where that happens, and it's a great way to make buildings, hospitals, universities, and schools more efficient. Energy efficiency, energy awareness. I know at some levels we're raising, they say, a whole army of little green police. Kids coming out of grade schools run around and turn off the light switches. They go in my case, it's my granddaughter, turn off the water. You know, it's like, yeah, okay, dear, that's great. But guess what? We know that a learned behavior is much easier than, in fact, she told me she's going to come let me know that I had 10 minutes left. A learned behavior is much easier to modify than old habits. I grew up in a generation, I wanted a big car, drive like a madman when I came out of university, you know, and stuff like that. Now, guess what? Can't do that anymore. And so it's important that we do that. And for efficiency and sustainability, it needs to be driven into the curriculums. I cannot find enough energy engineers in my business. I hire from my competitor. He hires from me. That's a no-win game, right? Salaries go up. Those people are all happy, but I can't get to the customers, and that becomes a problem. So we need to have more of that. This just points that, in fact, government, industry, and the people all have to, in fact, work together. There's not one single stakeholder that owns the whole issue. We all need to do something together. There are some great policies and examples around the world of, I think, sort of innovative things that can be put in place. Australia is one that I find fascinating. The Australian government made the decision that they would only lease office space that, in fact, was a green lease, as they had defined it, one that in a very energy-efficient building. Now, in Australia, they don't own buildings. It's always a public-private partnership, probably except for the military. What has that done? It's made all the property developers, in fact, make a much higher caliber building. They are more energy efficient. Well, what's the impact of that? Well, companies that move in and share that space with the government now have lower energy costs, which makes them more competitive. And so it starts spiraling up from there. And so they've been able to raise the efficiency of all the buildings in Australia just by the government making that step. I think that's pretty great. In Europe, they actually do have rules that specify you have to have your building certified for energy efficiency, or what's the energy consumption on the sale between one company and another. We should have something like that. California, green leadership has, I think, is pretty well known. They certainly had one of the more challenging states to deal with for as many people, and having once lived in Los Angeles, I used to enjoy tasting the air, and they've made that a little bit better. And guess what? Here in Missouri, show me green sales tax holiday means savings on purchases, certain appliances this week. Hey, that's great. That's walking the talk. And so things like that are progressive. It makes a lot of sense. It's good business. Let's talk about doing things. I asked the question, what are you doing as a person? So I'm going to give you my own examples. In my home, I put in a new air conditioning and heating system. The one that had been there 17 years got a little old in the tooth, wasn't working so good. That alone reduced my energy consumption, BTUs and kWhs, by 21%. That's a pretty good investment. We also have the high-efficiency washer and dryer. The dishwasher now only uses air for drying, no more heated drying. Guess what? That's okay. It works, and the energy bills go down. Compact fluorescents wherever we could. Can't figure out how to put them in a chandelier. It doesn't look so good yet. But truth is, we really don't use our dining room that often, so it's not really a big problem. 2 refrigerators. Now, guys out here, I know this is going to upset you, but most people have 2 refrigerators. The one in the garage, what's it hold? Soda pop, beer, and the leftovers you never eat. Come on. Let's move the beer inside. It's a closer walk. Get rid of the old refrigerator. You'll be much farther better off. Bottled water. It's not taste. It's all about convenience and packaging. And so stuff that comes from France, a plastic bottle, by the time it gets to your supermarket, it's been in that bottle for 6 months. It doesn't taste that good, and you're going to pay $9 a gallon for it. Come on, it makes no sense. We ought to figure out a different way to get to it than bottled water. Here's one, behavior science. That's my son. He came this summer and said, "Dad, I'm quitting my job." That's a little scary in today's economy, son. He said, "Yeah." I said, "I'm going back to school." I'm thinking, "Ching, this is going to cost me. And what are you going to study?" "Well, I'm going to go back in and study renewables and sustainability." Wow, what a compliment. He said, "I've listened to you for long enough. I believe it's the right place to be." So his business degree wasn't what he wanted to do for the rest of his life. So that's a behavior change. My wife and I have gone from 2 cars to 1. That's not as easy as it sounds, but it's actually pretty cool economically and from an efficiency standpoint. And my future idea, seeing as I have 3 daughters, and I also like to use the hairdryer to dry my hair, is to capture that waste heat, send it to what they call an air-to-water heat exchanger, and I could create free hot water instead of having a boiler. It's a good idea. Haven't figured out how to commercialize it yet. So let's just talk a little bit. I'm part of the Siemens, big, huge company, 400,000 employees. In our business, we are able to help customers literally. If it's on the utility side, guess what? We can help that. We can help customers in buildings with lights and all kinds of things. So integrated, there are many companies that do this. There's lots of help from the private sector. We walk the talk. We have sustainability policies. We're shrinking company cars. We have compact fluorescents. So we also walk the talk besides talking the walk. We have groups that focus on those different parts of the energy value chain. Our Building Technologies group, and that's the one I get to head for efficiency and sustainability, is large. It does well. We're in all 50 states and some 28 countries around the world to help our clients. Lots of products and services, and that's not important. But now I'm going to give a challenge. I'm going to give a challenge to Missouri. Now, I'm a clever guy, and I realize that your license plates, everywhere I drive around, it says the Show Me State. And so I went and I was able to research, and I figured out where that came from, the Show Me State. So I'm going to challenge it to go from the Show Me State to the Showstopper State. And you can say, got somebody to figure out how to put that in the license plate, and it says Green Leaders, right? And wouldn't that be great to have Missouri be the Green Leader State? So copying from Mr. David Letterman, top 10, let's go through those. Number 10, Missouri rated the most friendly state in the nation for green business. That would be great. Number 9, while others talk, Missouri created their Green Bank, dedicated to efficiency and sustainability. Wouldn't that be clever for everybody to get together and figure out how to fund energy efficiency projects? And when it gets repaid, it goes back into the fund for more energy efficiency projects. That would be terrific. Missouri leads the nation in green education. Missouri residents lead the nation in personal commitment to the environment. Missouri is the first state in the nation to achieve LEED certification for all state buildings. LEED certification is Leadership in Energy and Environment by Design by the U.S. Green Building Council. It's a way to bring buildings up to a very high level. Mizzou leads the nation in research and development on sustainable technologies. Ooh, that's not so easy to read. University of Missouri President Gary Forsey, Energy Summit 2009 was an Earth Day smash, yes. Governor Jay Nixon's Transform Missouri initiative wows the nation, so we're moving in the right direction. Tigers win the 2010 NCAA basketball championship. Hey! And last and most important is that I get back invited to Energy Summit 2010. This is why this is the best part of my job. I have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to finish in 30 seconds. Thomas Edison, who knows a lot about electricity, said, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Yeah, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, right? And Michelangelo said, the greater danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but it's too low and we reach it. And so I would leave and say, thank you, but know this, we have lots of work ahead, and we should set our heights high. Gravity is always there, and we will be a better and stronger nation. Not 15 years from now, we can start doing it this year and next year, because I know we can take first positive steps in being more efficient, consuming less, creating less greenhouse gases, and I know some people are depending upon it. Those of you who are young people going to school, it's probably your jobs are dependent upon it. For me, it's my kids and my grandkids, and some of you might be blessed to have great grandkids, but they're depending on it too. So with that, I say thank you. I'm looking forward to your conference. It's terrific. Job well done. Thanks.
Kansas City Power and Light.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was listening to some of the speakers talk about Earth Day. My mind just kept going back to this past Sunday when the phone rang, and it was my daughter in Baltimore. And you need to understand that she's a 30-year-old young lady who has spent a couple of years in Africa, who is constantly looking for ways to save the planet, never uses plastic, will only wear clothes that were not made by little hands, so she buys her clothes from the Salvation Army in some cases, in other cases from stores that cost 4 times as much. But she's a very devoted environmentalist, and she said to me, so Dad, what are you going to be doing on Earth Day? And I was very proud. She asks me that every year, and I was very proud to be able to say, well, our company is going to have 5 kiosks across our service area. We're organizing an Earth Day celebration and education in downtown Kansas City. And I'm going to be coming and speak at the University of Missouri Energy Summit about, among other things, energy efficiency. And she said, well, that's not bad. Which is high praise from her, I can tell you. But it's a great indication of the mentality that our young folks have, including, I'm sure, many of the students here at the University of Missouri. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we're trying to chart our course for the energy future. I would like to also add my congratulations to Gary, to John, and to the whole team that's put this summit together. I don't believe it could come at a more critical stage in the history of the state of Missouri. I think over the next several years we're going to be seeing significant risks and significant opportunities in the energy area. The risks, I think, have been talked about fairly widely here today, particularly the prospect of having some fairly punitive carbon cap and trade regulations that could drive cost here of energy up very significantly. Some studies I've seen, some of the more aggressive proposals could raise rates by more than 40%. But there's also alternative proposals where more time would be able to be spent to develop technology, the economic impact could be mitigated. So there's going to be a wide-ranging debate, but it's going to be a very critical debate that everybody who runs a business or operates a home in Missouri needs to understand. And this kind of a forum will really help us with that. There also are clearly a lot of opportunities, particularly in the area of expanding our energy efficiency programs. I complimented the previous speaker. I think he was very eloquent on the opportunities that exist here and now today, and also in the development of clean energy and clean energy technologies. I've gotten a chance to talk over the last year fairly extensively with Gary Forsey and some of his team, and I know that they are absolutely committed to playing a part in developing a clean energy business or set of businesses in the state of Missouri. I can tell you we're very excited about that. We're willing to support you guys in any way that we can. I think it's critical that an institution of the size of the University of Missouri provide not just innovation, but also an objectivity that only an academic institution can provide when you start looking at all these different ideas that people have and trying to sort through which ones would have the greatest impact. Plus, I think a more selfish reason, I happen to believe that a lot of our leaders of the future are being nurtured on the campuses of UMKC and Columbia and Rowland and others of your campuses. So we're excited about expanding our partnership, and I'm excited about your interest in this whole area. There has been a lot covered today on the whole area of energy and electricity. I'm going to try to take a little different tack and focus on utilities and how utilities might play and be a catalyst, an effective catalyst as we go forward. And I would say the headline that I would give for my comments is that I fully expect that we as utilities and we as the electric industry are going to see more change over the next 10 years than we've seen since Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, 100 plus years ago. I think we're really in for some dramatic change, and I think we need to be positioning ourselves to change ourselves culturally and also to change our business model, or we are at serious risk of being left behind or bypassed, very much like traditional companies in the automobile industry, the steel industry, and even the computer industry. If you think about it, 20 or 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, people were thinking that the mainframe computer was going to be the be-all and end-all in computing, and PCs were only going to be interesting for education and games. And a lot of companies got bypassed with that kind of an assumption. I think utilities have that same kind of risk today if we're not willing to step up and change. I thought it might be interesting for you all to start with a little bit of retrospective. Years ago, I was working with a lady who was trying to coach me on how to transform the culture of her company, and she said the thing that most people miss when they try to transform is they forget to reflect and release and learn from the past. They're too quick to jump into the future and forget to think a little bit about the past. So I thought it would be interesting just to look back quickly over those last 100 years since Edison invented the light bulb. And I think it's fair to say that it's been a pretty impressive achievement, the industry that has been built over those 100 years. They're highlighted by large-scale central generating plants. Every decade, we've been able to increase the efficiency of those plants. We've been able to find new and cheaper sources of fuel, including starting off with oil and then coal and then nuclear and to some degree gas. And the net result of all of that up to this point in time is we've been able to achieve flat or declining electric prices during a long period of time that has really gone a long way towards helping the U.S. economy grow and helping us all enjoy the quality of life that we enjoy today. So we should not discount the capabilities and the lessons that we've learned. But I also think they're inherent in that business model are some significant drawbacks that are really going to be impacting us today. The first is what I would call, comes into the category of asset utilization. If you think about it, and this diagram doesn't show up very well, I'm sure for those of you in the back, our power today flows one way, from the central generator through the transmission lines to the substation to the end-use customer. That whole system, all the generating plants, substation, transmission lines are built for that 100-degree day in the summertime. And on average, it's loaded at about 50% capacity. It's loaded above 70% capacity probably less than 10% of the time. In fact, I would argue, and this was built obviously in a regulated environment, because if you were a competitive industry, you would never make those kinds of investments for that low amount of utilization. And in fact, I would argue this is probably one of the greatest underutilized assets in America. There's another issue with the way this is built. Again, it comes out of the regulatory model, and that is efficiency has been given very little attention here. Utilities are incented to have people use as much electricity as we can, so we can build as much capacity as we can, so we can raise earnings. That's how we raise earnings, is by putting assets in rate base. So clearly, there's a gap in efficiency, and there's a gap in asset utilization that today, in today's environmental arena and also economic arena, we need to begin paying attention to. I thought, we've seen this chart earlier. This is the EPRI prism that Dan from Ameren went through. I thought I would just make a couple of observations on this. One is that if you take a look at the lower level sources of energy, which are basically coal with carbon sequestration, nuclear power, and it is clear that those do not come into play in terms of potentially reducing our carbon output until 2020 and beyond. So a way to look at this chart is that if in fact we want to even get started on reducing carbon so that we can get to 2030 and have emissions at the 1990 levels, the real bridge to that is energy efficiency and renewables. And that has huge implications for us as an electric utility company. So let me talk a little bit about that. I think this diagram is similar to another diagram that was put up here around the smart grid. Does a pretty good job in laying out the different business paradigm that we're going to have to be living with if we're going to be making significant inroads in the area of energy efficiency and renewables. I mean, we can do some today and we can get started today. But if we want to have the kind of impacts that are reflected on that grid, our world's going to look a lot different. This is basically moves from a one-way system to a two-way integrated network. At the center is a brain, and that brain is tied into homes where we can control energy. It's tied into intermittent sources of supply, such as wind, that oftentimes blow when you don't need it, and oftentimes don't blow when you do need it. In fact, we had a presentation at one of our recent board of director meetings where a fellow from EPRI was saying there are actually times in California these days in the evening where the price of energy is negative. That is, they're actually paying people to take the energy because they have excess energy on the grid because of the wind supply that's been built. That's clearly a whole different world than the world that we've lived in up to this point in time. There's also the need to dispatch distributed sources of energy. I happened to stop by the kiosk on the way in, and I said, our KCP&L kiosk, and I asked the guys, what's the most frequent question you're getting? And the most frequent question is, how can I buy some photovoltaic cells and get them hooked up and tie into your system? And so, that's a question we didn't even begin to get 3 or 4 years ago. So there's a lot of that, and also a lot in the area of plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. The plug-in hybrid electric vehicles potentially could be the sink for that excess wind energy that I was talking about. So to make a major impact, we have to start thinking of our system in a whole different paradigm, which is not going to be easy, which takes me to the really core message, I guess, that I'd like to leave you all on, and that is, what is the role for electric utilities in this new world? And as I see it, we have a choice. We have two choices. One is we can sit back and let this world evolve around us, as other companies and other industries have done. And I honestly believe that we will not see the load growth, we will not see the earnings growth, and we won't be creating the shareholder value if we don't participate in this. But the second choice is just as challenging, and that is we can decide to participate, but in a whole different way than how we've participated in the past. I mean, that one-way system I was talking about was really nirvana for an engineer. I mean, you get to build, own, operate, control. You don't have to partner with anybody. In fact, in the past, some people have joked, if it just wasn't for the customers out there getting interrupted, this would be a perfect system. That's the way traditional engineers have looked at things. Well, this world is going to have to be a different kind of a world. We're going to have to be thinking about how do we play with lots of players without having control? How do we act as catalysts to incentivize these kinds of investments where they make economic sense? How can we be willing to identify new technologies, integrate demonstration projects, market demonstration projects into our system, working with universities, working with others? It's a whole lot different. I think about our system planning engineers. They're the ones culturally that love to have control and feel very exposed if they don't have control, because they have, in the end, the obligation to serve. So how can we get them to change their mindset, to start thinking about how we can rely on a customer to look at information and reduce his load, or trust the fact that when he flips this switch, we're going to be able to sequentially interrupt load across our distribution system. There's also safety implications around that. Some of these distributed systems backfeed, which can be very hazardous. And, clearly, this is going to take leadership from the top of utilities across the country. This is not something that's innate in the core culture of our utilities. And it's also going to take different kinds of skills, marketing skills, technology skills. At KCP&L, we launched a little bit of this when we gained agreement across a broad range of folks to our comprehensive energy plan back in 2004. We decided to build a coal plant, but we also decided along with that we would do some environmental retrofits, we would build some wind, we would do some pilot projects along energy efficiency, load control, those kinds of things. And we actually were able to bring together regulators, industrial customers, and environmental groups, including the Natural Resources Defense Council and later on even the Sierra Club. To this day, I think we're one of the few utilities that has an active relationship with the Sierra Club. And we were able to do it because we insisted from the top down on a spirit of collaboration. I think much more of that is going to have to be done. And I guess the final thing I will leave you with, the final thought, is the thing that, and I alluded to this earlier, the thing the utilities are really going to have to learn to do is to get to know and understand and focus intensively on our customers. You think about Pepsi-Cola and how well they know the value drivers of the people that buy their products. It's far and away deeper and more intense than what we have at a utility company. And it sort of reminds me of a story. I've spent some time in New Jersey, and this was one of the favorite stories that was circulating around New Jersey when I was back there. Many of you, I guess, as I look out in the audience, probably know who the ex-Senator Bill Bradley is. But he was, as the story goes, he was sitting in one of the famous New Jersey diners one morning having breakfast, and he was talking with one of his friends, and the waitress came by, and he stopped her and he said, "Pardon me, ma'am, could I have another pat of butter?" And the waitress looked at him and said, "I'm sorry, there's only one pat of butter to the customer." And he looked at her and he said, "Well, you obviously don't know who I am." And she said, "No, I don't. Who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm Senator Bill Bradley. I was an All-American basketball player at Princeton University. I was a Rhodes Scholar. I was an All-Star in the National Basketball Association for 12 years. I've been a United States Senator for 18 years, and one day I may become President of the United States. And she looked at him and said, well, you obviously don't know who I am. And he said, no, who are you? She said, I'm the one in charge of the damn butter. So what we have to learn is the customer's in charge of the butter out there, and we have to adopt a different mindset. And it's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be fun, and we're looking forward to utilizing some of the bright talent in the university system to help us change that culture. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming our final speaker this afternoon, Bob Cruz of General Motors.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a long day, and I get the fortunate spot on the agenda being between you and whatever you're planning on doing tonight. I did spend a little time auditing a physics class here earlier this morning, and while I was there was a young man at the back of the class that decided to ask a question. The professor called on him and he said, "Excuse me, professor, could you tell me why we have to learn this stuff?" The professor quipped, "To save lives," and went on with his lecture. A few minutes later, the same student raised his hand and said, "Excuse me, professor, but could you tell me how physics saves lives?" And he said, "It keeps the idiots out of medical school." A good laugh, that woke everybody up. Obviously, I'm here from General Motors, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we see the future of the automobile and what we're doing to converge on a sustainable personal transportation. Now, we were founded over 100 years ago. We operate in 34 countries. We're headquartered in Detroit. We have about 243,000 employees. Last year, we sold about 8.4 million vehicles, a variety of brands, and we have about a 12.5% global market share. That includes manufacturing operations, 181 manufacturing operations in 34 countries. This is our global network. We're obviously a very large globalized company with partnerships and joint ventures that span every country on the globe. I'm from product development. Our product development network includes 13 engineering centers and 11 design studios all over the globe. We also have a global research and development footprint with science offices and labs around the world. Now, the role of GM Science Laboratories is to drive the front end of our innovation, which includes working with universities, national labs, suppliers, our strategic partners on exploratory research, investigations, and technology development. Here's our network today. As noted, it includes universities, suppliers, government labs, as well as other OEM collaborations like US Car and EU Car. The focus is finding and developing the best technologies and working with the best partners around the globe to meet the needs of our global customers. Now, we also have collaborative research labs that involve many universities across the globe. Our collaborative research labs are located at leading universities around the world. They're focused on specific areas of research or interest to General Motors. And in addition, we also have agreement with dozens of universities that are designed to expedite the start of collaborative research in key fields. So a great deal of the research we do is collaborative, and we're always looking for new partners. Last year, the global industry came in at just under 6.7 million vehicles, and we're forecasting that volume to grow to about 98 million annual sales in less than 10 years. There's already close to 900 million vehicles in the world today, but only about 13.5% of the global population currently own vehicles, and the global population is about 6.7 billion vehicles. From what we know about the market and the universal aspiration for personal transportation, we expect that 15% of the world's population will own vehicles by 2020. If so, there'd be more than 1 billion vehicles in the world, and that could go end to end 125 times around the world. As one of the previous speakers already stated, petroleum accounts for about 96% of personal transportation, and global demand for petroleum is rising. There's also an increased concern around global climate, and we're hearing more calls for sustainable energy pathways. Given all these issues, the auto industry has realized that as a business necessity, we have to reduce the automobile's dependence on petroleum to meet the continuing growing demand for our product. You can't pump enough oil to be able to meet the vehicle projections that I covered on my earlier slide. Now, our strategy is to displace petroleum through energy efficiency and energy diversity. I liked one of the speakers that talked about the silver shotgun blast, where it's lots of initiatives, not a single initiative that will displace our demand for petroleum. Now, our strategy is based on our assessment of the energy pathways for personal transportation. Now, there are many energy resources available, and there's various propulsion options that are available for personal transportation. But there's just a few energy carriers available for automobiles. Liquid fuels are by far the primary energy carriers for vehicles equipped with internal combustion engines, while electricity and hydrogen can be used for fuel battery electric vehicles and fuel cell electric vehicles. The good news is, even though there are only a few energy carriers suitable for use in personal transportation vehicles, there's many pathways to converting that energy into automotive fuels. Now, our vision for sustainability is to reduce the vehicle emissions to zero and increase fuel efficiency dramatically, to displace petroleum by diversifying energy sources used to fuel our vehicles, and our strategy is designed to provide a variety of powertrain and fuel technologies near, mid, and long term. There's no single best solution. We're applying advanced technology where it makes sense for our customers in terms of fuel efficiency, performance, and cost. In the near term, we're leveraging efficiencies such as advanced engines and hybrids, aggressively pursuing biofuels such as E85 ethanol, and for the longer term, we're developing new technology solutions like the Chevrolet Volt, our extended range electric vehicle, and our fuel cell vehicles, and I'll talk a little bit more about those later. Let's talk about alternative fuels for a minute. Now, GM offers products around the world that can use a range of different fuels, such as compressed natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas, biofuel blends as well. In the U.S., we're taking a serious look at natural gas as yet another way to diversify our petroleum as an affordable, sustainable transportation energy solution. So when T-Bone Pickens gets that natural gas infrastructure out there, we'll be positioned to have vehicles to be able to use that for personal transportation, not just the 18-wheelers. But ethanol is the biofuel that we're pushing the hardest because it has the potential to displace a significant amount of petroleum right now. In fact, it's the only proposed solution with the potential to dramatically reduce oil dependence in the next decade, over the next 10 years. Ethanol's great potential stems from the fact that it's renewable and can produced in volume from plants that are locally grown or even from trash or waste. Ethanol is an affordable alternative to gasoline, and there's a minimal cost to modify a vehicle to perform on ethanol. From an energy density standpoint, about 1.5 gallons of ethanol equals the same energy you can get in a gallon of gasoline. According to U.S. Department of Energy studies and our own analysis, cellulosic ethanol can reduce net CO2 emissions from transportation sources by up to 84% on a well-to-wheel basis. plus an E85 infrastructure can serve as a bridge to renewable hydrogen and therefore could be encouraged as an enabler to lower CO2 and energy diversity, both for the near and longer term. Recent studies suggest that by 2030, ethanol could replace almost 40% of the U.S. supply on an energy equivalent basis. Only a very small portion of these sources impact food cost or food supply. GM's currently the leader in the commercialization of sustainable biofuels worldwide and have produced more than 5 million flex fuel vehicles and cars and trucks that run on a combination of ethanol and gasoline or diesel and biodiesel. In the United States, we've made a commitment that half of our annual vehicle production will be flex fuel capable by 2012. We've also announced some partnerships with 2 companies developing processes that can produce ethanol from cellulosic feedstocks. Cascada's process makes biofuel from a wide variety of waste, including municipal waste and even old tires, for less than $1 a gallon. It's a thermochemical process with microorganisms consuming the waste and excreting ethanol. Mascoma's process uses the most prevalent source of biomass, cellulose from prairie grass, forest waste, and agricultural waste. It's a one-step biochemical process based on enzymes, natural chemicals that accelerate reactions, which promise to be very simple, affordable, and efficient. Both companies have the biofuel bookends to cover from thermochemical to biochemical and garbage to non-food energy crops. We also gain access to world-class scientists with expertise in both of these leading technologies. Like ethanol, electricity also has a significant potential as an automotive fuel. Our interest in using electricity to power vehicles stems from several factors. Electricity can be generated, as we've heard from many of the speakers here today, from a diversity of pathways, many of which are renewable. There's significant energy capacity available during off-peak periods to charge our plug-in vehicles, and the cost per mile is low given the efficient electric drive and the relatively low price for electricity in the United States. Off-peak power can cost as little as 4 to 6 cents per kilowatt hour, or as I just heard the previous speaker say, we can pay people to take power off-peak, which compares to less than $1 per gallon for gasoline when you're talking about an electric vehicle. Power generation comes from many different sources. The lowest cost is wind, followed by hydro and nuclear power. Coal is higher, but is still cheaper than natural gas. The lowest costs are dispatched first in increasing order of cost. Demand varies on a daily cycle and seasonality. Since plug-in vehicles would charge during off-peak hours, utility systems should be able to handle a significant load of plug-in hybrid vehicles. In fact, the Pacific Northwest National Lab has estimated there's sufficient off-peak capacity to fuel 43% of the light-duty fleet for an average daily drive of 33 miles. When you look at these pie charts, electricity is generated from very diverse energy pathways. Vermont uses nuclear to generate most of its electricity. Idaho uses hydropower. Rhode Island uses natural gas, and etc. There's just a variety of ways to make electricity. This also is true around the globe. As we already heard, France generates about 80% of its electricity using nuclear plants. China is the largest user of coal, followed by the U.S. is second. Australia is about 60% of their electricity is produced from coal and 20% from natural gas and hydro. An electrically driven vehicle is a vehicle that stores or creates electrical energy on board. It's purely electrically driven and does not have many of the pure mechanical drive components found in hybrids or conventional automobiles. These vehicles promise to be relatively simple because they have fewer moving parts than conventional hybrid propulsion systems. The range of electrically driven vehicles of interest in the auto industry includes battery electric vehicles, extended range electric vehicles, and fuel cell electric vehicles. We have a history with electric vehicles, starting about 10 years ago when we went to market with the first mass market electric vehicle of modern times, the EV1. It was a ground-up electric vehicle. Despite movie titles to the contrary, we didn't kill the electric car at the time. What happened was we made a bet on battery technology breakthrough that really didn't mature or didn't occur at that particular point in time. And even though we subsidized leasing, the public rejected the EV1's limited range with its batteries of the day. But we gained a great deal of knowledge about electric propulsion systems, and we're applying that to the Chevrolet Volt today. We still think it's one of the most efficient vehicles that has been produced. All of the systems on the EV1 were designed for efficiency. When you design an electric vehicle, you have to worry about how efficient your radio is, your lights are. Every inefficiency translates to reduced range. Now, we've had a lot of recent improvements in battery technology. Lithium-ion batteries are enabling a new era in battery electric vehicle concepts. The new cells are more stable, have higher energy density than their earlier versions of the technology, so we can develop battery packs that have both the high energy needed for increased electric range and the power needed for acceleration, all in a package that fits in a vehicle. The battery pack in the Volt is about a 16 kilowatt hour battery pack, weighs about 400 pounds. That equivalent battery pack in an EV1 weighed about 1,200 pounds and was about 3 times the size. It's a very active area of research with new materials constantly being developed. We're leveraging the knowledge we're gaining from our battery electric and hybrid experience and applying it to the Chevrolet Volt, what we call an extended range electric vehicle. The technology for the Volt, including its lithium-ion batteries, will be ready for volume production in November 2010, which is our target date for having the Chevrolet Volt in a dealership near you. Electricity is powered to the wheels at all times. It's stored in that 16 kilowatt hour lithium-ion battery. We only use about 8 kilowatt hours to deliver the 40 miles of range. The rest of that allows the battery to be a life of the vehicle battery. It recharges in less than 3 hours using 240 volts, or about 8 hours using a 120 volt outlet. It gets up to 40 miles, powered exclusively by electricity, but when the battery is depleted, it switches over to electricity generated by a small internal combustion engine. One of the things we learned from our EV1 experience is that electric vehicle customers suffer from something called range anxiety. Range anxiety is where you're at when your battery goes dead and then you have to go through a long charge period. The development engineers of the EV1 days, they needed to extend their electric development time, so they went out and bought some small motorcycle engines and generators and put them on trailers and hooked them to trailer hitches and brought the wires up to the vehicles so that they could drive indefinitely electrically to continue and have more electrical development time as they were bringing that vehicle to market. That whole concept essentially got merged into the Volt, where you have a small onboard generator to address that notion of range anxiety. Now, 40 miles, we picked 40 miles as our target range because our research shows that more than 75% of U.S. drivers drive less than 40 miles a day. So they can come back home to their garage and get more power off the grid. They're optimized around that 40-mile range, and you know that's why we have chosen 40 miles as our way to go to market with our next generation electric vehicle. Now, this chart shows that the annual energy usage of the Volt fares very typically to other electrical appliances that are around the house. Now, we're focusing on both battery electric and fuel cell electric propulsions because in the longer term, we believe vehicles will use both electricity and hydrogen. These two energy carriers both have great potential because they can be used interchangeably. They're produced from diverse energy pathways. They are generated from renewable feedstocks, and together they can displace a substantial amount of petroleum at a very affordable price. If I talk about hydrogen for a minute and why it's important as an automotive fuel, today more than 56 billion kilograms of hydrogen are produced globally each year. This amount is equal to what would be consumed by nearly 200 million fuel cell electric vehicles. and global hydrogen production is forecasted to grow by 45% to 81 billion kilograms by 2011. The point here is that there already is a hydrogen industry. It's already a huge global industry. It's mature technology with an outstanding safety record. Number two, about half of the global hydrogen production today is used in oil refineries. If this trend continues by 2011, this will equate to roughly enough hydrogen to fuel 135 million fuel cell vehicles, implying that over 15% of the world's car park could be energized by the hydrogen already being produced today for transportation. The point here is that an enormous amount of hydrogen is already being produced by energy companies as an affordable and necessary input to the production of gasoline. Number three, large hydrogen production exists near almost every U.S. and European city. This means that large quantities of hydrogen are already being produced where most Americans and Europeans live. Four, numerous studies have shown in the near term the cost per mile for hydrogen when fueling stations are well utilized could be in the equivalent of the $2 to $3 per gallon of gasoline on an untaxed basis. Thus, at today's gasoline prices, hydrogen is marginally cost effective. If we go back a year when gas was $4.50 a gallon, it's looking a little more attractive. Number five, as more hydrogen becomes available for transportation, prices are projected to decrease even further. The U.S. Department of Energy's long-term target cost for producing, distributing, and dispensing hydrogen is the equivalent to about $1 to $1.50 a gallon for gasoline on an untaxed basis. Number six, several analyses have shown that the deployment of fueling infrastructure is within reach. According to our own studies, a network of just 12,000 hydrogen stations would put hydrogen within 2 miles of 70% of the U.S. driving population, those living in the 100 largest metropolitan areas, and could connect every major metropolitan area with a hydrogen refueling station every 25 miles. Natural gas, number seven, and electricity and water are widely distributed in the U.S. today, making virtually any location a potential site for hydrogen production and vehicle fueling. So the infrastructure challenge perhaps is not of one to from wells, tankers, pipelines, refineries, delivery trucks, and stations, but rather one of appliances that can effectively and cost-efficient create hydrogen on a very distributed scale. Number eight, a 2% increase in natural gas supply would support 10 million fuel cell electric vehicles. These vehicles would reduce CO2 emissions by over 50% on a well-to-wheel basis when compared to the gasoline equivalent vehicles they displace. The point here is that natural gas is a good place to start, but certainly not the only source for the long run. Again, very synergistic with what T-Bone Pickens talked about at the start of this conference. Number nine, balancing the infrastructure availability with fuel cell electric vehicle sales growth and concentrated initial sales in specific geographic regions will be essential to manage early capitalization risks, and we're being very realistic in supporting the practical deployment of fueling coverage to just only a limited select few metropolitan regions. We need to get this started, and we need to start slow. And number 10, the hydrogen infrastructure for the automobile is economically viable and doable by automakers, energy suppliers, governments who have the courage to shape the destiny and take our infrastructure to the next level. If you talk about just how real it is, in May of 2007, we completed a 300-mile zero-emissions, zero-petroleum drive from our fuel cell facility in Hialeah Falls, New York, to Tarrytown, New York. The drive took place on public roads in real-world traffic conditions with no stops for refueling. It was an important milestone to the commercialization of our fuel cell vehicles, achieving the range expected by today's customers. We also are currently operating the largest number of fuel cell electric vehicles on the road as a part of the Chevrolet Equinox fuel cell car test fleet. Since late 2007, we call it Project Driveway. It has put more than 100 of these vehicles in the hands of everyday drivers and our business partners, both and government officials in California, New York, and Washington, D.C., and we're approaching over 1 million real-world kilometers on that fleet. And we also have 10 Hydrogen 4 vehicles that are deployed in Berlin as part of a clean energy partnership in Germany. Now, the technologies I've discussed today are helping the industry create a new automotive DNA. Today's DNA is virtually unchanged from the first vehicles we developed over 120 years ago. With the new DNA we're creating today, our vehicles will be electrically driven, energized by electricity and hydrogen, powered by electric motors, controlled electronically, and connected. By keeping our vehicles quite simple, storing hydrogen and electricity on board the vehicle, and using electric drive and fuel cells, we have the opportunity to use energy pathways from fossil fuels to renewable sources. The diversity of feedstocks will increase energy independence because each locality can select the energy option that works best for it. Our vehicles will emit zero emissions, and when the electricity or hydrogen is made from a renewable source, the entire system, from energy generation to torque at the wheels, can be zero emissions. Electric propulsion and fuel cells also provide improved energy compared to the internal combustion engine. This type of propulsion replaces complex gasoline, diesel, and hybrid systems with a single system that has only 1/10 as many moving parts as a conventional powertrain. It also enables the move from mechanical to largely electrical linkage and controls that can be tailored with software. Again, think limitless personalization opportunities, accessories from telematics to personalized ride attributes. The design flexibility and scalability of fuel cells, electric batteries, and electronic controls will drive new vehicle designs that provide potentially lower cost. And we can also simplify the supply chain because of the significantly reduced complexity. When you connect all the dots, it's truly a compelling opportunity to reinvent the automobile and the automobile business while we grow the industry in this very sustainable way. We see collaboration with industry and academia and the U.S. government as a great opportunity to address these rather grand challenges. We view research as a series of long-term investments as opposed to short-term grants. We recognize that although there's other automotive companies competing in the United States, the U.S. government is intended to help grow a domestic industry as well. Therefore, domestic automakers are more likely to attain government support for some of these grand challenges. Let's review the major points of what our advanced propulsion strategy can deliver: reduced fuel consumption and emissions, sustainable through energy diversity, displace petroleum, alleviate the demand for outgrowing the rather limited supply, reducing our dependence on supply and its subjection to uncontrollable risks. And by incorporating this strategy, we'll continue to improve conventional powertrains, gas engines, diesel and transmissions, because they're going to be the principal propulsion system, for the near term. And we're leveraging our biofuels, such as E85 and biodiesel, and increasing electrification of the automobile through rapid expansion of our hybrid portfolios and our plug-ins, including the range-extended electric vehicle, and ultimately moving to fuel cell vehicles. In summary, our challenge is to increase fuel economy, reduce emissions, and displace petroleum. There's no single solution. Our strategy improves conventional powertrains, brings biofuels to market, increases electrification, and we're working very aggressively to become a very sustainable part of the energy diversity and energy efficiency. I'll conclude my comments here with a quote from Charles Kettering. I think it's very appropriate for this forum. My interest in the future is because I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. Obviously, that's the focus of today's conference. I thank the University of Missouri leadership for putting this conference on and for allowing me to participate. Thanks for your attention. I know it's been a long day.
Don't leave, don't leave. First of all, please join me in a round of applause for all of our speakers today. A reminder, day 2 of our summit begins very early tomorrow morning right here in Jesse Auditorium. We begin at 7:30 sharp with 2 speakers you won't want to miss. The first one being Dr. Robert K. Dixon of the Global Environment Facility, which helps developing countries with environmentally sustainable energy projects. And the second speaker is Missouri's Director of the Department of Natural Resources, Mr. Mark Templeton. Following these two presentations, starting at 7:30, we have Governor Jay Nixon. Now I invite you to visit our posters and booths, and those who are registered for the summit are invited to a reception across the street on the Carnahan Quad. Just follow the signs, please. And a reminder, the last shuttle today departs at 8 p.m. this evening. Thank you very much for being with us today. See you tomorrow.